My son and daughter-in-law stole my worthless private land, laughing. It's rubbish, I gave them advice. When they found oil worth $30 million, I legally took it back. They went ballistic. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. The kitchen light spilled into the dark hallway like a warning I should have heeded. It was past 11, and I'd been lying in bed staring at the ceiling when their laughter cut through the silence of my house. That old fool actually signed it? My son Greg's voice carried that particular tone, the one he uses when he thinks he's outsmarted someone. I'd heard it before, usually when he was bragging about some deal at the car dealership that wasn't nearly as clever as he thought. I pressed myself against the wall, just outside the kitchen doorway. The January cold seeped through my slippers, but I didn't move. I told you it would work. That was Veronica, my daughter-in-law. Her voice had that satisfied purr like a cat that had cornered a mouse. Insurance documents. Classic. The man didn't even question it. To be fair, I hid his reading glasses this morning. Greg chuckled. Couldn't find them anywhere, could he? My hand went to my pocket instinctively. Empty. I'd searched for those glasses for 20 minutes before Veronica appeared with that stack of papers. The land is garbage anyway, Veronica continued. I heard the refrigerator open, the clink of a beer bottle. 240 acres of swamp and scrub brush near Ratliff City. But someone will buy it for hunting or whatever. Easy money. How much you think we can get? 40, maybe 50,000. It's not much, but it'll help with the credit cards. I stood there in the darkness, my heart beating slow and steady. 40 years as a petroleum geologist teaches you patience. You learn to read the signs, to wait for the right moment, to understand that what lies beneath the surface is often worth more than what you see above it. They thought I'd signed insurance documents. Instead, I'd signed a quitclaim deed, a legal document transferring ownership of my land to my son. Land I'd bought 35 years ago for $12,000. Land that Veronica had just called garbage. I almost laughed. Almost. 6 hours earlier, she'd knocked on my study door with that stack of papers and her most concerned expression. Dad, the insurance company called. They need these signed by Friday, or they'll cancel the homeowner's policy. You know how these things are. I'd reached for my glasses. They weren't on my desk, not in my pocket, not on the bookshelf where I sometimes leave them. I can read it to you, she'd offered, so helpful, so considerate. It's just standard renewal language, nothing important. Greg had appeared behind her, leaning against the doorframe with that lazy smile. Don't worry about it, Dad. Just a formality. I should have waited, should have found my glasses, should have read every word myself, but I was tired, and they were my family, and what reason would they have to lie to me? Now I knew. I retreated down the hallway, my footsteps silent on the hardwood floors I'd installed myself 20 years ago. The same floors Greg and Veronica had been walking on, rent-free for 3 years, ever since they'd moved in temporarily after Greg's apartment lease ended. Temporary. That word had a different meaning in this house. In my bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my hands. 67 years old. Retired petroleum geologist. Widower. Father of 2 sons. One dead, one apparently a thief. The funny thing about betrayal is that it doesn't hit you all at once. It seeps in slowly, like groundwater through limestone, finding every crack and weakness until the whole structure is saturated. I thought about the document I'd signed. A quitclaim deed transfers whatever interest you have in a property to someone else. No warranties, no guarantees, just a clean handoff of ownership rights. In Oklahoma, once it's signed and notarized, it's essentially done. Veronica had handled the notarization herself. Of course she had. Former real estate agent, after all. She knew exactly what she was doing. My jaw tightened. Not from anger. Not yet. From recognition. I'd spent my career identifying geological formations, reading seismic data, understanding what lay beneath surfaces that looked ordinary to everyone else. I'd missed the signs right in front of me. The subtle condescension in Veronica's voice. The way Greg avoided eye contact when asking for small loans that never got repaid. The gradual assumption of space in my home, my kitchen, my life. They'd been planning this, maybe for months, and I'd been too comfortable, too trusting, too focused on keeping peace in a family that had already declared war. I walked to my window and looked out at the darkness. Somewhere out there, about 40 miles north, sat 240 acres of worthless land, scrub oak and red dirt, and memories of a younger man who'd bought it on a hunch, back when the geology looked promising but the technology couldn't reach what he suspected was down there. I smiled then, a small, cold smile that had nothing to do with humor. They thought they'd stolen garbage. They had no idea what they'd actually taken, and I wasn't going to tell them. Not yet. I turned from the window and caught my reflection in the dresser mirror. Same weathered face, same gray hair, same calm expression I'd worn through countless boardroom negotiations and field crises. But something was different now. Something in the eyes. Greg and Veronica wanted to play games with documents and deception. Fine. I'd been reading fine print and analyzing contracts since before either of them was born. The next morning I made coffee at 6 a.m., same as always. Eggs, toast. The Ardmore newspaper spread across the kitchen table. When Greg stumbled in around 8, I looked up with my usual mild expression. "Mornin', son. Sleep well?" He froze for just a moment. A deer in headlights flash that most people would miss. I didn't miss it. "Yeah, fine." He poured himself coffee, not meeting my eyes. "You're up early." "Always am. Thinking of heading to Lake Texoma today. Weather's supposed to be nice for January. Maybe catch some striped bass." "Sounds good, Dad." Relief colored his voice. The old man suspected nothing. Business as usual. Veronica appeared 20 minutes later, perfectly composed in her business casual attire, as if she had somewhere important to be. She didn't. Her real estate license had been suspended 2 years ago, a fact I'd learned only recently when a neighbor mentioned it in passing. Something about ethical violations. The details were vague, but the suspension was not. "Good morning, Russell." She never called me Dad. Always Russell, delivered with a thin smile that suggested she was doing me a favor by acknowledging my existence. "Veronica." I folded my newspaper. "Beautiful day. I'm going fishing." "How nice for you." She turned to Greg. "We should talk about that hunting lease company. They might be interested in the property." I kept my face neutral as I stood, rinsed my coffee cup, and collected my fishing gear. They watched me leave with barely concealed impatience, probably already calculating how to divide their anticipated windfall. I drove to Lake Texoma, parked at my usual spot near the marina, and sat in my truck for a long moment. Then I pulled out my phone and called my granddaughter Olivia. She answered on the second ring. "Grandpa, how are you? It's been too long." Olivia, 24 years old, second year at University of Oklahoma's law school, the daughter of my younger son Robert, who died in a car accident 8 years ago. She was the only family member who called me regularly, who visited without wanting something, who looked at me like I was a person rather than an obstacle. "I need to ask you something, sweetheart, hypothetically." "Hypothetically?" I could hear the smile in her voice. "This sounds serious." If someone tricked another person into signing a legal document, told them it was one thing when it was actually something else entirely, what would that be called? A pause. "That's fraud in the inducement. It's when someone's deceived about the nature of what they're signing. Oklahoma takes it pretty seriously." Another pause, longer this time. "Grandpa, did something happen?" I told her. Everything. The hidden glasses, the fake insurance story, the conversation I'd overheard. When I finished, there was silence on the line. Those absolute... She stopped herself. "I'm sorry, Grandpa. I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be helpful. What are my options? You have 2 years from discovery to file a lawsuit, but you'll need evidence. Witnesses, documentation, anything that proves they misrepresented the document. Did anyone else hear them say it was insurance paperwork?" I thought about it. The notary. Veronica used someone she knows. That's not great. They'll probably back her story. What about neighbors? Anyone who might have overheard conversations? Maybe. I'll have to think about it. "Grandpa, you need a real lawyer. Not me. I'm still a student. But someone who specializes in real estate fraud. Oklahoma Bar Association has referrals." "I know. I just wanted to understand what I was dealing with first." After we hung up, I sat in my truck watching the lake. Winter sun on gray water, a few boats in the distance. Peaceful. Normal. As if my world hadn't shifted 12 hours ago. I thought about the day I bought that land. 1989. I was 32, working as a consulting geologist. We'd been running seismic surveys across Carter County, mapping potential formations. Most was unremarkable, the usual Arbuckle limestone, scattered Woodford shale. But something was odd about the readings near Ratliff City, a density anomaly, a shadow in the data suggesting something deeper. My colleagues dismissed it. Basement rock interference, they said, not worth pursuing. I wasn't so sure when those 240 acres came up for sale. Scrubby, neglected, considered worthless. I bought it myself. $12,000. Everything I had. 35 years of waiting. And now, just when horizontal drilling made formations like that accessible, just when I'd heard rumors about Chesapeake Energy sniffing around Carter County, my own son had stolen it from me. The irony was almost perfect. Almost. I reached into my glove compartment and pulled out a worn manila folder. Inside were my original survey notes, seismic readings I'd copied, and a hand-drawn map with a red circle around a specific area. Beneath the circle, in my handwriting from 1989, check later, potential. Greg thought he'd stolen worthless swampland. Veronica thought she'd pulled off a clever con. They were counting their $40,000 or $50,000 of hunting lease money like lottery winners. They had no idea they were sitting on what could be millions in mineral rights, and I had no intention of telling them. Not yet. First, I needed evidence, documentation, witnesses, everything Olivia mentioned, a case so solid no lawyer could tear it apart. Then I needed to wait for the right moment, the moment when the true value of that land became undeniable, when Greg and Veronica realized what they'd done and what they were about to lose. I started my truck and headed home, face calm, mind already mapping the steps ahead. 40 years in geology taught me this. Pressure creates diamonds, and patience reveals what's hidden. They'd made their move. Now it was time to make mine. February arrived with freezing rain and the kind of gray skies that make Oklahoma feel like the edge of the world. I spent the first week watching, not fishing, not reading, watching. It's remarkable what you notice when you stop looking at people as family and start seeing them as subjects of study, like geological formations. Once you know what you're looking for, the patterns become obvious. Greg, for instance. Every morning he checked his phone before saying good morning to anyone. Credit card alerts, I realized. The slight tightening around his eyes, the way he'd gulp his coffee and mutter about cash flow. The man was drowning in debt and didn't know I could see him sinking. Veronica was more interesting. She'd taken to making phone calls in the garage, thinking the walls were thick enough. They weren't. I heard fragments. Yes, the property near Ratliff City. 240 acres. Looking for a quick sale. Quick sale. That was Veronica in 2 words. Quick, easy, fast money. Never mind that the land had been in my name for 35 years. Never mind that her husband's father was sitting in the next room, supposedly oblivious. On February 3rd, I drove to the Carter County clerk's office. The woman behind the counter pulled up the records without a second glance. Quitclaim deed, filed January 18th. Registration number 2024-047. Property transferred from Russell Vernon to Greg Vernon? She looked at me. That's you? The original owner? Yes, ma'am. Just checking that everything was filed correctly. The bureaucracy of betrayal runs on paperwork, and the paperwork was impeccable. My son was now the legal owner of land I never intended to give him. That evening I found a listing in the yellow pages I'd circled weeks ago. Ronald Harris, licensed private investigator. The ad promised discreet, thorough, professional. I dialed the number. Harris Investigations. Mr. Harris, my name is Russell Vernon. I need background information on 2 individuals, my son and daughter-in-law. A pause. Family matters can get complicated. They stole my land through fraud. I intend to get it back legally. But first, I need to know exactly who I'm dealing with. My retainer is $3,500 a month plus expenses. When can we meet? We met the next afternoon at a coffee shop in downtown Ardmore. Harris was a heavyset man in his late 50s with the kind of face that had seen everything and been surprised by nothing. He listened without interrupting while I explained the situation. So they told you it was insurance paperwork, he said when I finished, and you signed without reading it. I couldn't find my glasses. My son had hidden them. Don't beat yourself up. These schemes work because they exploit trust. That's what makes them fraud. He pulled out a notepad. I'll start with financial backgrounds. You mentioned your daughter-in-law was a real estate agent. Her license was suspended. I don't know the details. I'll find them. Sometimes patterns repeat themselves. For 3 weeks, Harris dug while I watched. At home, I played the role of oblivious old man to perfection. Asked Greg about his work. Complimented Veronica on her cooking. All the while, I noted every phone call, every hushed conversation, every lie they thought I didn't hear. On February 24th, Harris called me to his office on 2nd Street. Sit down, Mr. Vernon. I've got your report. The folder was thick, too thick for comfort. Your son, credit card debt across 4 accounts, $87,000. Auto loan, $34,000. 3 months behind on payments. His financial situation is desperate. More than I'd guessed. The numbers explained the hunger in Greg's eyes. Now, your daughter-in-law. Harris slid a document across. License suspended in March 2022 by the Oklahoma Real Estate Commission. Reason: misrepresentation of documents to clients. She convinced an elderly couple to sign what they believed were lease agreements. Actually a sales contract, same scheme, different victims. I stared at the document. She'd done this before. There's more. Harris pulled out another sheet. Your neighbor, Patricia Cole, 72, was gardening near your fence on January 14th, the day before you signed. She heard your son and daughter-in-law talking. Direct quote, "Tell him it's insurance papers. The old man never reads the fine print anyway." There it was, a witness who heard them planning the deception before it happened. Mrs. Cole is willing to provide a written statement, Harris continued. She's sharp, credible, and apparently not fond of your daughter-in-law. Something about a borrowed casserole dish never returned. Despite everything, I almost smiled. Never underestimate the grudges of neighbors. I paid Harris his fee and took the folder. In my truck, I read through everything twice. The debts, the suspended license, the witness statement. Every piece of evidence I needed to prove that January 15th wasn't a gift. It was theft by deception. I picked up my phone and called Olivia. "Grandpa, did you find something?" "Everything," I said. "Now I need a very good lawyer." Patrick Reed's office was on the 2nd floor of a brick building at 312 West Main Street in Ardmore. Suite 205. The brass nameplate read, Patrick Reed, attorney at law, real estate and civil litigation. I'd found him through the Oklahoma Bar Association's referral service. No personal connections, no favors, just credentials and a reputation for handling fraud cases. The waiting room smelled like old books and coffee. A secretary glanced up when I entered. "Mr. Vernon, he's expecting you." Reed stood as I entered his office. 52 years old, gray at the temples, handshake firm but not aggressive. His desk was organized chaos. Stacks of files, legal pads covered in notes, a computer displaying what looked like property records. "Mr. Vernon, please sit." He gestured to a leather chair. "I've reviewed the preliminary information you sent. Tell me everything from the beginning." I did. The evening of January 15th, the hidden glasses, the insurance story, the overheard conversation, Harris's investigation, everything. Reed took notes without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back and studied me. "You were a petroleum geologist. 40 years. So you understand documentation, evidence, building a case from fragments." "I do," he nodded. "Mr. Vernon, what you've described is textbook fraud in the inducement. Your son and daughter-in-law deliberately misrepresented a legal document. They told you it was insurance when it was actually a quitclaim deed transferring ownership. Can I get it back? Yes. Under Oklahoma Title 15, Section 59, a contract obtained through fraud is voidable. You have 2 years from discovery to file suit, and you discovered the fraud the same night you signed." He pulled out a legal pad. "Here's our strategy. First, we file a lawsuit to void the quitclaim deed on grounds of fraud. Second, we file what's called a LS pendens, a notice of pending litigation. This gets recorded against the property and blocks any sale until the case is resolved." "They can't sell while it's pending?" "Any buyer would see the LS pendens in the title search and walk away. No one buys property with active litigation attached. Your son and daughter-in-law will be stuck." What about the witness, Patricia Cole? Essential. Her testimony proves premeditation. They planned the fraud before executing it. Combined with your daughter-in-law's history, he tapped Harris's report, we have a compelling case. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was deliberate. What will this cost? Reed didn't flinch. 15,000 retainer. 400 hourly after that. A case like this, if it goes to trial, could run 30 to 40,000 total. I had 73,000 in savings. Pension of 2,800 monthly. It would hurt, but I could manage. Do it, I said. Reed smiled slightly. There's one more thing. He turned his computer monitor toward me. I've been researching your property. The 240 acres near Ratliff City. What about it? Are you aware that Chesapeake Energy has been conducting geological surveys in Carter County, specifically around your land? My heart stopped, then started again, harder. I've heard rumors. More than rumors. They've filed permits for exploratory drilling within 5 miles. The Woodford Shale, the Arbuckle Limestone. They're showing significant potential for horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing. I said nothing. Let him continue. Mr. Vernon, that land you bought in 1989 might be sitting on substantial oil reserves. If Chesapeake decides those mineral rights are valuable, he paused. We could be talking millions, potentially. I thought about Greg and Veronica celebrating their theft of worthless swampland, about Veronica trying to sell 240 acres for quick cash. They had no idea what they'd actually taken. Mr. Reed, I said, how long before we can file? 2 weeks to prepare documentation. We'll file in early May. That gives us time to gather everything and gives them time to dig themselves deeper. I stood and shook his hand. Mr. Vernon? He held my grip an extra moment. You're not doing this just for money, are you? No. I met his eyes. They looked me in the face, called me a fool, and stole from me. My own son, his wife. They thought I was too old and too stupid to notice. And now? Now they'll learn that some things buried underground have a way of coming to the surface. That evening I returned home to find Greg and Veronica watching television. They barely acknowledged me as I walked past. Hey, Dad, Greg said without looking up. Veronica found a hunting club that might lease the property. 8,000 a year. Not bad, right? That's nice, son. Veronica rolled her eyes. I told him we should sell, not lease. But there's no rush. Nobody else wants that swamp. I nodded and continued to my room. Inside, I sat on my bed and allowed myself a small smile. 8,000 a year. They thought they'd won 8,000 a year. In 2 weeks, my lawyer would file. The land would be frozen. And when Chesapeake Energy came calling with their millions my son and daughter-in-law had tried to steal, I would be there, waiting. I opened my drawer and looked at my old geological maps, the red circle around those 240 acres. The note I'd written 35 years ago. Check later. Potential. Later had finally arrived. The weeks between mid-March and late April were a masterclass in patience. I'd spent decades studying rock formations that took millions of years to develop. Waiting a few more weeks for justice? That was nothing. Patrick Reed called me on March 20th with news that made every day of waiting worthwhile. Mr. Vernon, I've obtained public records on geological surveys in Carter County. Chesapeake Energy has been surveying the Ratliff City area since November. They've filed permits for 3 exploratory wells within 7 miles of your property. I sat in my truck at Lake Texoma, fishing rod untouched beside me. What's the estimated value? Based on Woodford Shale deposits and Arbuckle Formation access, industry analysts estimate mineral rights in that area could be worth $20 to $35 million. I closed my eyes. $35 million. My son had stolen land worth potentially $35 million, thinking it was garbage, thinking he'd pulled off the con of a lifetime. They didn't just steal my land, Mr. Reed. They stole an oil reservoir, which makes our fraud case even stronger. The potential value demonstrates significant financial motive. After we hung up, I drove home and resumed my role as the oblivious old man. It wasn't hard. Greg and Veronica barely noticed me anyway. I was furniture to them. Background noise, a minor inconvenience occupying space in a house they'd already mentally claimed as their own. I made dinner that night. Grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. Set the table for 3 like I always did. Greg came in around 6, loosening his tie. "Smells good, Dad. What's the occasion?" "No occasion, just felt like cooking." I handed him a plate. "How's work?" "Fine." He took the plate without meeting my eyes. "Busy." Veronica arrived 10 minutes later, phone pressed to her ear. She hung up when she saw me watching. "That was a realtor," she announced. "He thinks a hunting club might pay $45,000 for the property." "That's more than we thought," Greg said, eyebrows rising. "It's still garbage money." Veronica stabbed at her chicken. "But the buyer needs to secure financing first." 45,000. They were haggling over 45,000 while sitting on millions they didn't know existed. I almost pitied them. Almost. Over the next few weeks, I watched their drama unfold with something between dark amusement and cold satisfaction. The hunting club deal fell through. The buyer couldn't get a loan. Veronica spent 3 days in a fury, slamming doors and snapping at everyone. "This land is cursed," she shouted one evening. "Nobody wants it. We're stuck with 240 acres of nothing." I turned the page of my newspaper and hid my smile. Meanwhile, Reed continued building our case. Patricia Cole signed her written statement, documenting the conversation she'd overheard on January 14th. We obtained Veronica's disciplinary records from the Oklahoma Real Estate Commission, the suspension for misrepresenting documents to elderly clients. Every piece of evidence fit together like sedimentary layers, building toward something solid and undeniable. On April 28th, Reed called with news. "We're ready to file. The lawsuit, the Ellis pendants, everything's prepared. We submit to Carter County District Court next week." "Do it." "There's something else. A land management company called the county clerk's office asking about recent quitclaim deeds near Ratliff City. Probably Chesapeake, doing their homework before making an offer." I thought about Greg and Veronica trying to unload their worthless swamp for $45,000. They had no idea that one of the largest energy companies in Oklahoma was circling their stolen property like a shark smelling blood, and soon, very soon, they wouldn't be able to sell it at all. "File the papers, Mr. Reed. It's time." That weekend, I went to Lake Texoma one more time, sat in my usual spot, and actually fished for the first time in months. Caught 3 striped bass. Released them all. When you've waited 35 years for something, you learn to appreciate the moment, right before everything changes. The quiet before the earthquake. The stillness before the drill hits oil. On the drive home, I thought about Greg, my son, the boy who used to follow me around on geological surveys, asking questions about rocks and fossils. What happened to that kid? When did ambition curdle into entitlement? When did family become just another resource to exploit? Maybe it was Veronica's influence. Maybe it was always there, waiting like oil beneath the surface. She'd found his weakness, that desperate need to prove himself, and exploited it. Together, they'd decided I was just an obstacle, an old man with assets to be harvested. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Either way, it didn't matter now. The lawsuit was ready. The evidence was gathered. The trap was set. I was ready. On May 3rd, 2024, Patrick Reed filed our lawsuit in the District Court of Carter County. Case number CJ 2124-0892, Vernon v. Vernon. The complaint alleged fraud in the inducement and sought to void the quitclaim deed, dated January 15th, 2024. Simultaneously, he filed a LS pendants, a notice of pending litigation recorded against the property. From that moment forward, anyone searching the title would see that the land was under legal dispute. No bank would finance a purchase. No buyer would touch it. Greg and Veronica's stolen property was now frozen solid. The summons arrived at Greg's workplace on May 5th. Morrison Ford, the dealership where he worked. He was showing a customer a new F-150 when the process server walked in, asked for Greg Vernon, handed him the envelope in front of colleagues. Greg's face drained of color as he read, "Fraud in the inducement," on official court documents. His co-workers watched, whispered. The customer quietly excused himself. Greg called Veronica immediately, voice cracking through the phone. "He sued us. The old man actually sued us." I was in the kitchen, slicing vegetables for dinner, listening to her muffled response through his speakerphone. "That's impossible. He couldn't have. He doesn't know. He knows. There's a summons. Vernon versus Vernon. Fraud in the inducement. He's trying to take the land back. The panic in his voice was almost musical. I'd waited 4 months for this moment. 4 months of playing the fool, the doddering old man, the oblivious father who didn't notice he'd been robbed by his own son. Now they knew. Now the game had changed. Greg came home that evening like a storm rolling in off the prairie. The front door slammed so hard the pictures rattled on the wall. Veronica was right behind him, face twisted with barely controlled fury. They found me in the living room, reading a book on geological formations of the Arbuckle Mountains. Appropriate, I thought. What is this? Greg threw the summons on the coffee table. His face was pale, almost gray. His hands trembled as he pointed at the papers. What did you do? I closed my book slowly, removed my reading glasses, the ones I'd found hidden in Veronica's drawer 3 days after I'd signed that deed. Set them aside. I filed a lawsuit, I said, to get my land back. Your land? Veronica stepped forward, voice rising. You signed it over. You gave it to us. No. I met her eyes and held them. You told me I was signing insurance documents. You lied. That's fraud. That's ridiculous. You misunderstood? Did I? I held up my glasses. I found these in your drawer, Veronica. Greg hid them so I couldn't read what I was signing. I turned to my son. You remember that, don't you, Greg? Greg's mouth opened, closed. He looked like a fish pulled from Lake Texoma and dropped on the dock. Confused, desperate. Dad, He swallowed hard. It wasn't like that. We were trying to help. Help? I stood up slowly. You called me an old fool, Greg. You laughed about tricking me. I heard you that night in the kitchen. The old fool signed it. Those were your words. His face went from gray to white. Veronica grabbed his arm, nails digging into his sleeve. You can't prove any of that, she said, but her voice had lost its confidence. Fear flickered in her eyes. Actually, I can. I placed the folder in front of them. Patricia Cole heard you planning this. The day before I signed, she's given a written statement, and your disciplinary record with the Oklahoma Real Estate Commission, license suspended for misrepresenting documents to elderly clients. I smiled. Same scheme, different victim. Veronica snatched the folder. Read the first page. Her face transformed. Shock, then disbelief, then pure rage. You ungrateful old man, she screamed. We've taken care of you for 3 years, and this is how you repay us? Taken care of me? I kept my voice calm. You live in my house rent-free, you eat my food, and then you steal my land and call me a fool. I shook my head. I noticed everything, Veronica. Greg sank onto the couch, head in hands. Dad, please, we can work this out. We're family. Family doesn't steal from family, son. We'll give it back, the land. Just drop the lawsuit. Too late for that. I've filed a LIS pendants. That land is frozen until the court decides who owns it. You can't sell it. You can't lease it. You can't do anything with it. I turned toward my bedroom. I suggest you find a good lawyer. I closed the door behind me and listened to the muffled sounds of their argument. Veronica shouting, Greg pleading, the crash of something thrown against a wall. For the first time in months, I felt something like peace. The next day, I learned they'd hired Sean Bennett, an attorney known for aggressive tactics and courtroom theatrics. Veronica's choice, no doubt. She wasn't going down without a fight. That was fine. Neither was I. And they still had no idea about the oil. June arrived with record heat and a counterattack I'd been expecting. Sean Bennett, the attorney Greg and Veronica had hired, filed a motion that made me laugh out loud when Reed showed it to me. They're claiming you have dementia, Reed said over the phone. Bennett's arguing that you voluntarily gifted the land to your son, then forgot about it due to age-related cognitive decline. He's demanding a court-ordered medical evaluation. I sat in my truck at Lake Texoma, watching the morning sun paint the water gold. That's their strategy. Say I'm crazy? It's a common tactic in elder fraud cases. They're trying to flip the narrative, make you the unreliable party instead of the victim. Good luck with that, Reed chuckled. I was hoping you'd say that. You remember that cognitive evaluation I suggested back in February? The one Dr. Patricia Mitchell performed at Mercy Hospital? Full neurological workup. Took about 2 hours. Her report is sitting on my desk right now. Patient demonstrates cognitive function fully within normal range for his age. No signs of dementia, memory impairment, or diminished capacity. Patient is fully competent to make legal and financial decisions. She's willing to testify in court. I smiled at the phone. Preparation. It's not just for geological surveys. You always need to anticipate what lies beneath the surface, in rocks, in contracts, and in people. Bennett's dementia motion was denied 2 weeks later. Judge Morris wasn't impressed by arguments unsupported by any medical evidence, but the real bombshell came on June 22nd. I was home making lunch when Greg burst through the front door, face flushed with excitement. Veronica was right behind him, clutching her phone like it contained the winning lottery numbers, which in a way it did. $30 million, Greg shouted. Dad, did you hear me? $30 million. I set down my sandwich slowly. What are you talking about? Veronica thrust her phone at me. On the screen was an email from Chesapeake Energy, addressed to Greg Vernon as the registered owner of 240 acres near Ratliff City, Oklahoma. The company was offering $30 million for the mineral rights, the right to extract oil and gas from beneath the surface. Oil, Dad! Greg was practically dancing around the kitchen. There's oil under that land. We're going to be millionaires. I looked at the email, looked at my son, grinning like he'd just won the lottery, looked at Veronica, already mentally calculating what designer furniture and luxury cars she could buy with $30 million. They had no idea I'd known about this possibility for 35 years, or that Chesapeake had contacted my lawyer weeks ago, expressing their preference to deal with me, the legitimate owner, instead of them. That's quite an offer, I said carefully. Isn't it incredible? Veronica's voice dripped honey. And to think we almost sold it to that hunting club for $45,000. This changes everything, Russell. You should drop the lawsuit. We can work something out. A fair split. Split it. I repeated the words flatly. You steal my land, call me a fool, laugh about it in my kitchen, and now you want to split $30 million with me? Greg's excitement dimmed slightly. Dad, come on, we're family. We made a mistake, okay? A big mistake. But this is life-changing money. We can all benefit. How much were you planning to give me? They exchanged glances. Veronica answered, $10 million. You'd get 10, we'd get 20. That's more than fair, considering you stole it through fraud? That's just your interpretation. No, I cut her off. That's going to be the court's interpretation. I took my sandwich to my room. Behind me, Veronica hissed furiously, Do something. Make him understand. But they couldn't do anything. The lease pendants I'd filed blocked all transactions. They were sitting on $30 million they couldn't touch. That evening, Reed called with news that made the day perfect. Mr. Vernon, Chesapeake Energy's legal team reached out. They've done due diligence and discovered your lawsuit. They don't want to deal with Greg. Their exact words, We prefer to negotiate with the legitimate owner. When you win, they're ready to work with you. The irony was beautiful. Greg and Veronica had stolen worthless garbage and were now watching millions slip through their fingers. July was the longest month of my life. The Oklahoma heat was brutal, record temperatures day after day, and the tension in my house could have cracked concrete. Greg and Veronica had become shadows of themselves. The $30 million offer from Chesapeake hung over them like a golden cloud they couldn't touch. Every day the lawsuit continued was another day that money sat frozen, unreachable. Every day was another day of watching their dreams slip away. Veronica had stopped wearing makeup entirely. Her usually perfect appearance had crumbled. Dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights, nails bitten to the quick, hair that went unwashed for days. The stress was eating her alive from the inside out. Good. Greg had stopped going to work. I heard him on the phone with his manager at Morrison Ford, making increasingly desperate excuses about family emergencies and personal health issues. His voice sounded hollow, defeated. The confident man who'd proudly called me an old fool just 6 months ago now shuffled through the house like a ghost, avoiding eye contact, jumping at sudden sounds. Their lawyer, Sean Bennett, was doing everything he could, but the evidence against them was overwhelming. The dementia claim had collapsed completely when Reed submitted Dr. Mitchell's detailed evaluation. The voluntary gift argument had no documentation to support it, no letter of intent, no acknowledgement, Nothing that would explain why a retired petroleum geologist would give away potentially valuable mineral rights for free. And Patricia Cole's witness statement hung over their case like an executioner's blade. On July 15th, Greg made one last desperate attempt. He caught me on the porch at dawn, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over the flat Oklahoma horizon. "Dad." His voice was quiet, different, broken. "Can we talk? Really talk?" I didn't turn around. "I'm listening. I know what we did was wrong. I see that now. But $30 million, Dad. $30 million. Think about what that could mean for everyone. For Olivia. You could pay for her law school, set her up for life, make sure she never struggles the way we have." "I'm already paying for Olivia's law school." He paused. "What?" "Started a fund 3 years ago. Every semester is covered. She'll graduate without a penny of debt. Has nothing to do with this land." Greg was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice cracked. "So this really isn't about money for you?" "It never was." "Then what? What do you want from me?" I finally turned to face him. My son, the boy I'd taught to fish on Lake Texoma, the kid I'd taken to geological sites, explaining how pressure and time turn sediment into stone, how patience reveals what's hidden beneath the surface. Somewhere along the way, that curious kid had become this, a man who would steal from his own father and laugh about it in the next room. "I want justice," I said quietly. "You lied to me. You stole from me. You hid my glasses so I couldn't read what I was signing. You laughed about it in my own kitchen while I stood in the hallway listening. What I want is for a judge to look at all the evidence and tell you, officially and publicly, that what you did was wrong. And then what? You'll have the land back, the 30 million, everything. And I'll have nothing. You'll have exactly what you earned, Greg. Nothing more, nothing less." He stared at me with something between hatred and despair. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face unshaven. The expensive watch Veronica had bought him hung loose on his wrist. He'd lost at least 15 pounds from stress. "I'm your son," he whispered. "Your only surviving son. Robert's gone. I'm all you have left. Doesn't that count for anything?" "It counted for everything. Until you proved it didn't count for you." He turned and walked away without another word. The hearing was set for August 15th. Judge Glenn Morris presiding. Reed told me Morris had a 30-year reputation for fairness and thoroughness, and a particular distaste for fraud cases involving elderly victims. "We have strong evidence," Reed said during our final preparation meeting. "The witness statement, Veronica's disciplinary history, your medical evaluation, the Chesapeake valuation showing motive, but nothing's ever guaranteed in a courtroom. Bennett's aggressive. He'll try to rattle you. I spent 40 years dealing with hostile executives and skeptical investors. I think I can handle one aggressive lawyer." On August 14th, the night before the hearing, I sat alone in my study with my geological maps from 1989. The red circle around those 240 acres. The note in my own handwriting. Check later. Potential. 35 years of waiting. Tomorrow, it would all come to a head. I put the maps away, turned off the light, and went to bed early. Tomorrow, justice would finally rise to the surface. August 15th, 2024. Carter County Courthouse, 20B Street, SW, Ardmore, Oklahoma. The courtroom smelled like old wood and anxiety. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Patrick Reed, folders of evidence stacked neatly. Across the aisle, Greg and Veronica flanked Sean Bennett. Greg was sweating despite the air conditioning. Veronica sat rigid, knuckles white on her purse. Judge Glenn Morris entered at 9 a.m. sharp. 63 years old, silver-haired, eyes that had seen every kind of human deception. He wasted no time. Case number CJ 2024-892, Vernon versus Vernon. Mr. Reed, present the plaintiff's case. Reed delivered with surgical precision. Patricia Cole's statement. The neighbor who heard, "Tell him it's insurance papers. The old man never reads fine print." Veronica's disciplinary record. License suspended for identical document misrepresentation. Dr. Mitchell's evaluation. Full cognitive capacity. Chesapeake Energy's letter. Mineral rights valued at 28 to 32 million. Your Honor, Reed concluded, the evidence shows deliberate deception. They hid Mr. Vernon's glasses. They misrepresented a quitclaim deed as insurance. They had financial motive, over $120,000 in debt. Bennett's cross-examination was aggressive. Mr. Vernon, isn't it true you've had disagreements with your son for years? We've had differences. That doesn't give them the right to steal from me. Many elderly parents transfer property to children as estate planning. I was tricked into signing a document I believed was something else. But you signed voluntarily. I signed what I was told was insurance. My glasses were hidden. Judge Morris leaned forward. Mr. Bennett, do you have evidence the glasses were not hidden? No, Your Honor, but move on. The turning point came when Veronica took the stand. Mrs. Vernon, did you tell your father-in-law the document was insurance? She squirmed. He may have misunderstood. Yes or no? Did you use the words insurance documents? Long pause. I might have mentioned insurance. Patricia Cole heard you say, tell him it's insurance papers. Is she lying? Veronica's face reddened. She misheard. Is the Real Estate Commission also mistaken? They suspended your license for identical misrepresentation. That was different. How? She couldn't answer. Judge Morris questioned Greg directly. You understood what a quitclaim deed was. Greg went pale. Yes, Your Honor. You understood your father believed he was signing insurance? He didn't ask questions. Because you hid his glasses. I didn't mean. Mr. Vernon. The judge's voice cut like flint. Your father is a retired petroleum geologist with 40 years of experience. Do you expect this court to believe he would voluntarily sign away land worth $30 million for nothing? Greg's mouth opened, closed. Nothing came out. This court recesses until tomorrow for my ruling. Outside, footsteps behind me. Greg's voice desperate. Dad, please. 50-50. Whatever you want. I stopped, turned. Greg stood panting, panic in his eyes. Veronica behind him, mascara running. Please, he repeated. I'm your son. I looked at him for a long moment, then walked to my truck without a word. August 16th, 2024. 9 a.m. sharp, Carter County Courthouse. The courtroom was silent as a tomb. Judge Glenn Morris entered, sat down, and opened his folder without preamble. In the matter of Vernon versus Vernon, case number CJ 20-24-0892, I have reached my decision. I sat perfectly still, hands folded on the table. Across the aisle, Greg gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles went bone white. Veronica had stopped breathing entirely, her face frozen in terrified anticipation. The evidence presented in this case clearly and convincingly demonstrates that the defendants, Greg Vernon and Veronica Vernon, obtained the plaintiff's signature on a quitclaim deed through deliberate and calculated misrepresentation. They told him the document was insurance paperwork when they knew it was not. They concealed his reading glasses to prevent him from verifying the document's contents. This constitutes textbook fraud in the inducement under Oklahoma statutes, Title 15, Section 59. Judge Morris looked directly at Greg and Veronica. His expression could have frozen fire. This court therefore rules that the quitclaim deed, dated January 15, 2024, registration number 2024-0847, is hereby declared null and void. Ownership of the 240 acres of land near Ratliff City is restored to its rightful owner, the plaintiff, Russell Vernon. Additionally, the defendants are ordered to pay all of the plaintiff's legal costs in this matter, totaling $23,450. Greg made a sound like air escaping a punctured tire, a wheeze, a gasp. His face had gone the color of old chalk, gray-white, bloodless, drained of all hope. He slumped in his chair as if someone had cut the strings holding him upright. Veronica's reaction was different. Her mask of composure shattered completely. "This is unfair," she screamed, shooting to her feet. "He's old. He's going to die eventually, and it'll be ours anyway. You can't just—" "Mrs. Vernon?" Judge Morris's voice cracked like a whip. The bailiff took a step forward. "One more outburst, and I will hold you in contempt of court, and you will spend the night in a cell. Your case is concluded. Remove yourselves from my courtroom. Now." She stood frozen, mouth open, tears of pure rage streaming down her face. Sean Bennett grabbed her arm and physically steered her toward the door. Greg followed like a zombie, shuffling, not looking at anyone, not looking at anything. I watched them go, The satisfaction was quieter than I'd expected. Not triumph, not revenge, just completion. Outside the courthouse, Reed shook my hand firmly. "Congratulations, Mr. Vernon. You did it. What happens now?" "The Ellis Pendens is lifted immediately. The land is legally yours again, and Chesapeake Energy's team is already waiting for your call. They want to move fast." I signed the mineral rights agreement with Chesapeake on September 5th, 2024. $30 million, payable in structured installments over 5 years. After federal and state taxes, legal fees, and Reed's contingency bonus, I'd clear approximately $28.5 million. Not bad for 240 acres of worthless garbage. My next task was harder. On September 10th, I gave Greg and Veronica 30 days written notice to vacate my house. They'd been living in my home rent-free for over 3 years, eating my food, using my utilities, and apparently planning to steal everything else I owned. That arrangement was finished. They didn't fight the eviction notice. They didn't have the energy or the legal standing. Their lawyer's bill from the trial had wiped out whatever savings they'd had left. On October 10th, 2024, I watched from the porch as Greg loaded boxes into a rental truck. Veronica sat in their car, staring straight ahead through the windshield, refusing to acknowledge my existence. Greg made one final approach. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps, looking up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Dad," his voice was hoarse, broken, "I'm your son, your only living son. Robert's gone. I'm all you have left. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" I looked at him for a long time, at the lines that stress had carved into his face, at the defeat in his posture, at the hollow emptiness in his eyes where entitlement and greed used to live. "In geology there's a law," I said quietly. "What's hidden underground always comes to the surface eventually. Oil, water, minerals," I paused, "and truth. You didn't steal land from me, Greg. You stole my trust. The land I got back. The trust stays buried." He stared at me for another long moment, searching for something. Forgiveness, maybe, or understanding. He didn't find it. He turned and walked to the truck, started the engine, drove away. I never saw either of them again. October 2025, 13 months after the verdict. I sat on my porch with my granddaughter Olivia, who had just graduated from the University of Oklahoma College of Law. I'd paid for every semester, every textbook, every expense. She was debt-free and had a job lined up at a firm in Oklahoma City. We watched the sunset paint the Oklahoma sky in shades of orange and gold, the way it had done for millions of years before any of us were here, and would continue doing long after we were gone. "Grandpa," she said quietly, "do you ever regret it? Any of it?" I considered the question carefully. No, I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret doing what was right. "Do you think you'll ever forgive them?" "Forgiving isn't the same as forgetting," I said finally, "and neither one means letting someone steal from you without consequences. What I did wasn't revenge, Olivia. It was justice. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" I smiled. "Revenge is about making someone hurt. Justice is about making things right." I gestured toward the horizon where the last light was fading into purple and blue. 35 years ago, I bought some land that everyone said was worthless. I waited. I was patient. And eventually the truth came to the surface. Just like in geology. Just like in geology. I finished my coffee. Some things take time, but if you wait long enough and pay attention, what's real always rises. We sat in comfortable silence as darkness settled over the land. My land. Finally, after everything, mine again. Justice was served. The truth had risen. And life, as it always does, moved forward. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.